Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. If you want to check out past shows, episodes, anything like that, head on over to theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com. We are your only source for daily political news from a conservative perspective here in Kentucky. And those of you who listen to the show often know how much we talk about education. And we talk about education so much, especially K through 12, not only because it's such a huge part of the future of our society. Obviously, it's how we shape our future and how well educated they are, but also it is a huge place of spending in our state government. By department, the spending that goes into our K through 12 schools is more than any other thing. In fact, the public schools K through 12 system is when few things are mandated to provide to the people of Kentucky. And so with that in mind, whenever we are dealing with something on education, I do think it's worth time digging into. And yesterday we started talking about the Kentucky Department of Education's search for the education commissioner. So for those of you who are unaware, Jason Glass was the education commissioner here in Kentucky. He stepped down in 2023 to go off to Michigan. He was obviously a very political person. He was very far left. He promulgated a lot of the regulations that came out of the Kentucky Department of Education that involved things like hiding from parents when a child is transitioning to a different gender at school, to make sure you're hiding from parents, things around the LGBTQ side of things. He was openly hostile towards Republicans on those issues. He, in fact, told teachers at one point they could just quit if they didn't feel like transing the kids, fighting back on things like getting pornography out of our K through 12 educational libraries, fighting back on books that clearly shouldn't be in those libraries. That was something took issue with, was fighting against. And so he stepped down, he left, and we have a new person coming in. And there was a recent law change in 2023, and this is probably part of the reason why he left. And that was Senate Bill 107. And Senate Bill 107 made it to where that the Senate had to confirm the Kentucky Board of Education commissioner. So it gets appointed by the Kentucky Board of Education, and then the Senate must confirm that, okay? And they have to confirm reappointments too, so they can serve for at least 4 years unless the Kentucky Board of Education otherwise removes them, and then the Senate gets to vote on whether they want to reaffirm them. And that was an addition. I think he felt that he probably, when it get reaffirmed, it was time to move on while the getting was good, so he moved on. And so that launched the search. One of the Kentucky board members has been serving as an acting commissioner while this search has gone on. And recently they announced 3 people to take the position over. And that includes a Buddy Berry that we talked ad nauseum about yesterday, a Robbie Fletcher, and a Jim Flynn. Those are the 3 finalists. And so Buddy Berry we dug into, pointing out how he's got a pretty dicey situation going on regarding a nonprofit where there's a lot of questions to be asked about his use of taxpayer funds, his use of taxpayer funded resources, and his staff earning speaking fees off them possibly in this nonprofit. I encourage you to go back and listen to yesterday's show if you missed it. Once again, you can go over to theandrewshow.com to go ahead and take a look at that. But we didn't really dig into the 2 other finalists, and I think it's worthwhile for us to really take a good hard look at these individuals. And the next person up here would be Robbie Fletcher. Robbie Fletcher is currently the superintendent of Lawrence County Schools. That's a district with, I think, right above about 1,000 or so students. And according to niche schools, they have a 42% reading proficiency rating and a 23% rating in math. So not very great. They do have a 92% graduation rate, though, which is better than Buddy Barry's schools that he's overseeing. But the performance is pretty awful. As I mentioned yesterday, you would think if you're going to grab somebody to lead this role that has been a superintendent, because in a way they're over a lot of the other superintendents, you'd like to see somebody that has themselves seen success in the position and can be a shining light, a beacon of how you're supposed to do it. How do you get kids to learn how to read? How do you get them to learn how to do math? You would think that's what you'd be looking for, but in this case, not the case. So Robbie Fletcher, at least his performance is lackluster as a superintendent. So, that alone should be a reason he shouldn't be considered. However, there is some issues when it comes to Robbie Fletcher's push, and that deals with his political side of things. So he does have a lot of advocacy posts on his social media regarding things like funding public schools, against school choice, and that's important too, that we consider how are they going to handle the school choice system. Because one, it goes into how much can they be a part of that process, but two, how much do they want to see those succeed? If they're just saying, I don't care what the solution is, public school, charter schools, private schools, whatever it is, we just want to see kids perform. We want to see kids learn. And we don't care how it's done. We want to teach kids how to read, write, do math in the most efficient way we possibly can, that we can get all these kids proficient, because that is, at the end of the day, our job. So you'd like to see somebody who doesn't care as we had this amendment coming forward, because if this amendment passes, this will be a crucial time of guiding that kind of policy. And if we have somebody that is open to those kinds of things, that does open up a little bit different solutions to the problem than if we have somebody who is attacking that and trying to make school choice look as bad as possible because they're just against it. And Robbie Fletcher appears to be just against it. But it's not just those kind of liberal thought processes he has as superintendent of Lawrence County. The other problem he's got is he's anti-Republican. He just seems to really hate Trump voters. And I say that, well, maybe not anti-Republican. I don't know what his registration is, but he does seem to dislike Trump voters. And I say that based upon some of the posts on social media he's engaged with. He's engaged with several posts that are painting Trump voters as stupid and idiots, and they're dumb for voting for him. Keep in mind, over 60-70% of Kentucky voters voted for Trump this last time. Between 60 and 70% will probably do so this next time around. Have to ask the question, do we want somebody in place that thinks over half of the voters in Kentucky are stupid? Do we want somebody who's going to attack school choice? Do we want somebody who's going to be doing everything they can to see that fail? That would be the question. And also, too, when we look at Robbie Fletcher, it's kind of known, right, that there might be some issues, but Fletcher might be the best. Apparently, Fletcher's wife is a Republican, though. I guess he just dislikes Trump voters based upon, like I said, I'm just basing this upon his social media behavior. So that's why I said maybe he doesn't hate Republicans. Maybe he just hates Trump voters, but that makes up a large amount of Kentucky voters. And I'm just saying, I believe his wife is a Republican based upon what a reliable source has told me. Gosh, I just have the coughs today. I'm going to try to cut out as many of them as I can. But sorry if you hear me coughing too much. I've just had a horrible cough this week. But coming up, we'll be digging into Jim Flynn, the third person trying to get this position. We'll have that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Before the break, we were going over the Kentucky Department of Education candidates for education commissioner here in Kentucky. The board has narrowed it down to 3 finalists, one of which will be submitted over to the Senate for confirmation. We've gone over 2, Buddy Berry last episode. We went over Robbie Fletcher last segment, and now we'll dig into Jim Flynn. Jim Flynn is he's a former principal, Simpson County superintendent, and is now the director of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. Maybe you've never heard of him. Basically, he is a lobbyist to the legislature. So you would think that would mean he probably has a better chance. I mean, he doesn't only do that, right? But that's the kind of the point of the association, is to put together materials and helps for superintendents while at the same time advocating to the legislature on behalf of the superintendents. And generally, a director is chosen based upon the fact that they can have a working relationship with the legislature. So as far as who do you think would have the best chance going into this initially to confirm them, you would think it would be Jim Flynn. He has the best relationships with everybody, you would think. Now, Buddy Berry does as well. but there's some issues here. But before we go into the more background-y type issues that may come up and be a question, let's go into what he actually believes in and supports. Because you'd like to say that we should be able to look at people based upon their basis of beliefs, what they think's important. And so I want to go to this video that was put out by the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents called Kids First Kentucky. I want you to listen to this video. It's not too long. It's about 2 minutes and 25 seconds long. Jim Flynn talks and stuff. So not only did his organization that he's director of put this video out, but he also speaks in the video a few times. And so I think it's a good look into what we can kind of get some idea what Jim Flynn thinks about public schools, educating children, what's important and what's not. Let's take a listen to this. And after we listen, I'll kind of go over some points from it.
Our children represent our future. When we talk about developing a workforce for the future of Kentucky, it begins in our public schools. When we talk about wanting our children to have a successful life, that foundation's laid in our public schools in partnership with our families.
Kids First Kentucky is where we need to be focusing all of our energy. It's all together that we need to wrap around our students and make sure we're supporting them not only financially, but with mental health supports, which are increasingly needed, and not only for students, but for our staff.
The most critical aspect of educating our kids is the quality of people that are coming into our organizations. And it's imperative that we attract, hire, and retain the very best people to work with our students. They're our most precious commodity, and we need the very best working with them.
That's our goal, to prepare them for the future. And so we have to give all kids all the tools and resources, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, social, behavioral. We have to do it all. And then the pandemic revealed so many things with our mental health issues, not only for our students, but for our teachers as well. And so that means we have to hit the health and the wellness piece, the relationships, before kids are going to be ready to learn.
We are funded on our attendance, not on our membership. And so if I have the exact same number of students that are coming to school at a lesser rate, my funding drops. But my buildings have to be staffed as if 100% of the kids are going to be there. And everyone's going to have to take a step back and say, does the state of Kentucky adequately fund what the state of Kentucky wants for public education?
Well, education is the key to economic development. It's the key to an educated citizenry. That's the reason public education started. So everything we do in the Commonwealth, no matter what sector we're in, whether it's public education or any other sector, our kids are why we do what we do.
That's why our schools are so important. That's why they're such a fabric and a centerpiece of our communities.
So that gives you, just kind of go through it, kind of let you know what they think's important, what they think it needs to talk about. You heard Jim Flynn at the beginning and end of that video. It's put out by his organization. While every word in there maybe isn't his, he did approve it. This is something he believes is accurate. So I think it's worth going through that video in parts to and talk about some different points they made to point out why the ideology here of people like Jim Flynn is not what we want in our K through 12 education. First thing they said is the foundation for successful life is laid in public schools. This is a problem to me because the foundation for a successful life should be laid by the parents, because a successful life depends upon things like your behavior, depends upon more, your the outside work outside the school. A person can't be laying the foundation for successful life at a 1-to-20 ratio. If you really want kids to learn how to behave, if you want kids to learn how to be successful in society, that falls to the parents to do. And they said, well, schools are absolutely important in laying a successful life. That's the first idea. You already, in my mind, have it wrong. You're not there. They did mention in partnership with the parents. It's not in partnership with the parents. It's in service to the parents. The parents are the ones that lead it. And this weird backways way of looking at it is how our schools have spent so much more money while not accomplishing anything. Also in the video, you heard supporting students' financial and mental health. And we need to provide those same supports for our staff, as well as our students. They said that in the video. Supporting students with their financial and mental health. You're not counselors. It isn't your job to worry about the mental health of children. That is their parents' job. You're not counselors. You're teachers. You're not therapists. You're teachers. You're not there to help them with all these other things outside of teaching them how to read and write. And later on in the video, you heard the person say, well, health and wellness and relationships and mental health, those all we have to address before kids are ready to learn. And because schools think that is something they need to address before they're ready to learn, instead of staying in their lane and leaving it to parents to worry about all the things other than teaching a kid how to read, write, and do math, kids aren't learning how to read, write, and do math. Remember, 2 of the superintendents we're looking at, their school districts have a math proficiency of 23%, meaning over 75%, 3/4 of their kids are not proficient in math. And we ask, why does this happen? It happens because, and you heard it in that video, these people are focusing on everything, but actually educating the kids. They care about their feelings. We need tools and resources for mental and social and emotional learning. There's a book that Abigail Fryer just put out called Bad Therapy that really zeroes in on schools' obsession about this and talking about how they are destroying kids' mental health. Because these processes and tests, that kids don't need to see therapists. They're kids. They don't need social emotional learning. I mean, how did all these adults, all these teachers ever become functioning people in society without their social emotional teaching from the school? And they don't even stop to think about that. And then there's something else that was said that I think we need to take a look at and was mentioned, and obviously therefore something important to Jim Flynn, is that the attendance funding. So they said, we're funded based upon how many kids show up. So if we have the same amount of kids but they're showing up less, we don't make as much. And instead of following that up by saying, so we really need to be digging in to how do we get kids to show up to school? How do we increase attendance? Instead of saying, we need, CAS, Kentucky Association of School Superintendents, one of their roles you think would be, hey, let's work with superintendents on how to improve their attendance at the schools they're overseeing, because it's a funding issue for them. But instead of looking the problem of attendance and saying, oh, that's something we need to solve, or we need to make sure we get things in place and empower parents. The reason why the attendance is falling off is because parents don't think it's their role. You've literally said that mental health is your role, social emotional learning is your role, that kids having the right relationships, all that is more important than you teaching. It's literally what you have to do before you can get them ready to teach. You're telling parents you don't have a role in your kid's life. You're in partner with the schools. The schools aren't in partnership with you because they don't feel like they have a role. They think it's the government's job to raise the kids. Yeah, I'm not shocked that the attendance isn't there because the government isn't shown up at their house yet to make them go to school. that task still relies with the parent. A parent you've indicated to is secondary in a kid's education, not the most important factor. That's why school choice is so important. It puts kids first as the most important, or parents first as the most important factor of a kid's education. Parents get the choice because parents should be in control of the kid's education. When people talk about school choice, oh, well, these schools, how do we know it'll help and all these other things? The very fact that we are sending a message from our government, from our entities, our schooling entities that say you are in control of your parent, of your child's education. You're the one in control. Engages parents and creates better outcomes. But instead, we hear people like Kentucky Association of School Superintendents and Jim Flynn pushing parents to the side, saying, no, the public schools will handle it. And naturally, of course, Jim Flynn also very much against school choice, very tacky towards it. Now, if that was his only problems, you could still see him not being an obvious no. But that's not his only problems. We actually have some other concerns going into the side of sexual misconduct, possibly, maybe by him, maybe by others, things he's allowed to come on, grooming in schools while he was a principal. We'll be digging into that story. Not saying he's guilty of it, but we'll be digging into the facts around it and what we know about that situation. After this short break, you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Before the break, we were digging into Jim Flynn as one of the three possible options for Kentucky Department of Education commissioner, the head honcho of public schools in Kentucky, the guy that basically all the superintendents report to on a day-to-day type basis, the one in charge of promulgating state law into school policy to hand out to the school districts. And that position, there's three finalists. The board picks it, and then it goes over to the Senate for confirmation. And they named three people. And we've dug into two. We were in the middle of digging into Jim Flynn. We went over his ideology around schools, which is a problem. But there's another problem. And it stems from 2001 when he was the principal of Shelbyville High School in Shelby County High School, in Shelby County. And these accusations stem from a Me Too moment of sorts that was wrote, back in, 2018-ish, 2019-ish probably. And it's from an individual named Laura Wills Kopelman. Okay, Laura Wills Kopelman. And what it is in regarding is she put up a blog post on sexual harassment, kind of like a grooming situation going on that happened to her at high school when she was 16 years old. Now, I will say this. Laura alleges that what happened between her and a school administrator. Now, she never names the name of who the guy was, but does say things like he was powerful, he was above the teachers. So the alleged perpetrator appears to be somebody higher up in the administration in the Shelbyville High School. At the same time, Flynn was the principal. She also says that the perpetrator went on to higher positions and to be influential in education in Kentucky, despite everyone knowing that the person was engaging in this types of behaviors. We'll go into the behaviors here in a bit. And so the alleged perpetrator is either Flynn himself, or he's 100% knows who this person is, and he did absolutely nothing to address the behavior, the alleged behavior. So he allegedly did absolutely nothing to address the alleged behavior. And I have to say alleged behavior for legal reasons, because nothing has been proven in the court of law. All we have is Laura's website and her statements about the incidents. However, it's not just her writing what happened. She does have a fair amount of evidence that she has put forward. She's got diary entries she posted from her time, though she does block out the person's name. She has photos she posted of her with the guy who was, I'm going to call it grooming her with his face locked out. She has her mother's notes at the time, and her mother was aware of the situation, trying to deal with the schools to address what occurred. And she has her notes from the time. She also has and posted pictures of AIM messages. This is back during the time of AIM. So instant messages between her and other kids at the school, talking about how they heard from teachers that, and heard the rumor from a teacher that Laura, in this case, was engaged in a relationship with this individual. Like I said, she cites some specific incidents, gives some specific time frames. Like I said, shows us gifts that it was given. So a lot of these Me Too things you look at and you say, one thing or another, is this accurate, right? She also posted about this in 2017, her Me Too kind of thing, and made the post about her, and she tagged her mom in it too, apparently, about this kind of thing that happened, talking about what occurred. And there's 112 comments on there, and a lot of the comments are people saying, former classmates saying, I heard the rumors, I judged you for engaging in a relationship with him. I heard these rumors that something was going on, and yada, yada, yada. So what does she actually allege? Well, she alleges that a school administrator at Shelby County High School started developing a attention kind of relationship with her. She says this: I was only 16 when it began. I was a high achiever with a tumultuous family life, the perfect combination to compel me to dig deeper into my academics and activities at school. It was through my heavy involvement in school clubs and organizations that I first became acquainted with him. The over-the-top attention from this high school staff member started my sophomore year. At the time, I was flattered that someone so important and powerful thought I was special. For almost 2 years, he showered me with attention, praise, phone calls to my home, and gifts. During summer break between my junior and senior years, he invited me to a celebratory lunch in honor of me being selected as a Kentucky Governor's Scholar. I was told to meet him in the high school parking lot, where I expected to reconnect with the other Governor's Scholars from my school. Instead, I found only him waiting in the parking lot, and I was whisked 30 minutes away in his car alone to the next town over for a private lunch where he gave me a Britney Spears CD and a motivational card. At other times, she also posted a picture of the card, by the way. At other times, he played guitar for me and offered to teach me lessons during after school hours, and sang a song to me once he had written called She's Out of Reach. I asked him if it was for his wife. He said no. She asked who then. He said, I can't tell you, but I might tell you one day. There's also logs of odd phone calls where they would get phone calls and it'd just be breathing, or the person would ask if she was there. The mother would ask, who is this? And they would hang up the phone. And so this is definitely kind of grooming behavior. It never went into, it appears, sexual contact. It is more about special attention type behavior. And this type of behavior by an individual, very kind of, I'm going to call them predators, that understand what the laws are and kind of work a way around them. And so what occurs, and this happened at Raceland Worthington, is happening at Raceland Worthington, has happened, and I covered this in my show, this was 6-7 months ago when this was occurring, where you had a teacher who was grooming kids. It's not actually illegal in Kentucky to groom children for sexual contact after they turn 18. You see, what these people do, these men do, is they establish a relationship with a young girl in high school, 15, 16-year-old. They make them feel special, shower them with attention, but they never take it towards actual contact until that person has graduated high school, turned 18 years old, and now they can kind of cash in, quote unquote, cash in on that will that they've built with them to turn it into sexual contact. And currently in Kentucky law, it appears it's not actually illegal. So Laura hasn't disclosed who the person is or taken it to court. And I think it's mainly because, one, it happened over 20 years ago. Two, it's not necessarily illegal behavior. It's gross and disgusting behavior, but not necessarily illegal. And 3, there's a statute of limitations concern. They're on the civil side of things. What would you do? So by not naming the person, you don't get the kind of attacks that come with having named a person. Those who know. The person who knows. She's talking about it. But at the same time, you're not exposing yourself to those attacks without having any reason to do so. So I do see what her motivation would be behind posting this story. It's on lettertomyhometown.com. Anyways, to posting this story while at the same time not naming the person. So these are all alleged behaviors that allegedly occurred either with Flynn or while Flynn was principal. And a big part of the story is the fact that everybody knew. The teachers were spreading rumors, kids were talking about it. And the point was, most of her story is about the fact nobody intervened to say, hey, this is kind of wrong. This shouldn't be happening. And this person then went on to higher positions, she states. So it's either Flynn or somebody Flynn was aware of and allowed this to happen and didn't stop it and didn't look out for the girl. One of two things. So either there's a predator, allegedly a predator, or allegedly a predator enabler. Both are alleged. So what's this mean for the choice going forward? Well, we'll be digging into that. After this short break, you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Before the break, I've been digging into these 3 choices for Kentucky Department of Education. And I've gone over the choices kind of ad nauseum at the last half of yesterday's show and then all of today's show, kind of talking about each of these people. And it's kind of been building to who do we choose? Because our options are we have one person who seems actually politically neutral-ish. However, he is apparently a big buddy of Bashir and a big donor, Buddy Berry, who may be engaging in inappropriate behavior with his nonprofit School on Fire, where he's enriching himself using taxpayer-funded resources and has a system already set up where if he doesn't abandon it, becoming the Commissioner of Education, then he would, he would have a ready-made infrastructure for receiving payoffs, essentially illegal payoffs from school districts as they can pay his nonprofit in order to pay him speaking fees for coming there. So you have somebody who's doing something possibly torrid, possibly illegal or inappropriate, who's possibly misusing funds, who at least has the system set up already to receive payoffs, unless he agrees to abandon it, who's in charge of a school district now that's not doing good. I mean, the graduation rate there is 77%, reading proficiency is like 46, math proficiency is like 23. It's low. He's failing in all those categories, and so he's not good at being a superintendent, I would argue. On top of he's got these tort issues. Then you have Fletcher, who Robbie Fletcher, who superintendent of Lawrence County Schools, who is not politically neutral, it would appear, has expressed distaste and dislike for any Trump voter who is outwardly against school choice. And then you have Flynn, Jim Flynn, who is an advocate against school choice, who, we went over the ideology he puts forward on schools. Robin Fletcher, by the way, also, I would argue, a failing school district. Again, 23% competency in math, 40-ish% competency, according to niche schools, in reading. Fletcher at least does have a much higher, I believe, 87% graduation rate. So that's going for him. So at least he's got that better off than others, 92% graduation rate. So he's doing much better than Buddy Berry there. And then you have Jim Flynn, who's in charge of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. And the videos he's putting together and everything else are forwarding ideologies and belief systems that do not coincide with what I want to see for our educational future in Kentucky as a parent, what you shouldn't want to see, because I think it's more the continued bad policies of dumping money into a black pit and caring about everything but teaching a kid math. On top of that, Jim Flynn has this alleged past in 2001 as Shelby County principal, where he either allegedly was allowing a direct report or a person in his administration to engage in a grooming behavior with a 16-year-old girl at the high school, allegedly. Once again, all that allegedly. But you do have questions, just like Buddy Berry. I'm not saying he's necessarily doing anything illegal or fraudulent or corrupt with his nonprofit, but there's questions there. We have questions that need to be answered. Same with Flynn, questions that need to be answered. But he's also a huge advocate against those things. So you got two people basically failing as current school superintendents based upon the outcomes. I know some people may know them and say, no, I love the schools in Eminence, or I love the schools in Simpson County. And you may love the schools, but objectively speaking, 42% proficiency in reading, 23% in math, less than half the kids are proficient in reading, and less than 3/4 of the kids, and less than 25% of the kids are proficient in math. Like, objectively speaking, you would say that is failing. You would say that. So you get two superintendents failing, another who, as a principal, has some questions about his behavior. All of them putting forward, or Fletcher and Flynn putting forward political ideologies that don't work and advocating for policies in K-12 education that have been proven to be not working, putting emphasis on the wrong things. So who's our best choice here? Well, I think it's clear Robbie Fletcher is the only one who doesn't have any kind of legal issues that we should have questions with. But what if the Senate just doesn't approve any of them? What happens? Well, if they put forward an option and the Senate disallows it, votes no on the person, and then at the end of session, it votes no, the commission can appoint an acting commissioner. The school board, the Department of Education school board, head school board for the state, can appoint an acting commissioner until the next time they come into session, where they can then decide whether or not to confirm that acting commissioner. So if they really want, so this could be what's going on, is they really want this one person to do the job, but instead what they're going to go ahead and do is appoint somebody else they know is going to get turned down because of issues, and then they could appoint that person. That could be the problem. But I just went through three people and they all have issues. All of them have issues to where if I was a senator, I could vote no easily, which calls for the question of what does McPherson and Jacobson LLC do? What do they actually do? And who are those people? Well, McPherson and Jacob LLC was paid up to $65,250 by the Kentucky Board of Education to seek out and find candidates for this position. Their job responsibilities include identifying potential candidates, assimilate, review, and screen candidates, submission for qualifications and eligibility, meet and or consult with Kentucky Board of Education to select candidates for the interview, conduct detailed background checks on each candidate selected for interview, including but not limited to criminal history, employment history, and public controversies. Two of them have public controversies already, big ones. That took me like a day of digging to find. You can pay me the $65K. I would have found this. So why are we paying them? Why is this the best they could pull up with? Which leads me to the next question. If Jacobson and McPherson actually are good at their job, if the Kentucky Board of Education actually is trying to find somebody they think is the best they can find that the Senate would approve, if that's what's really going on, then that only leaves this option, that this is the best they have. That KDE is not doing this on purpose, that they're putting forward the best, most qualified candidates that they think the Senate would approve. Which leads you to answer a very important question. Why are our schools so awful in this modern time? Why can't they get kids to proficiency, even half their kids to proficiency? Why can't They teach kids how to read and write and do math. Why are our kids in K through 12 education getting sadder, committing suicide at higher rates, going into crazy ideologies at higher rates, having issues, behavioral issues at higher rates? Everything's getting worse. It's funny to see the schools say that we need to focus on mental health, something that they failed on, objectively speaking, based upon the results. And we can answer, why do our schools, why are they so awful? As a whole, maybe your local school's okay, maybe your local teacher's okay, but why is our K through education system so broken? And the answer could be because this is the best that we have. People in charge of failing districts with already questionable controversies, with beliefs and ideologies that have led to these failing schools. This is why education has so many issues. We don't have good people leading it. We don't have people. I mean, could you not find anybody who's qualified, who's never ever possibly been involved in a scandal of a child being groomed or sexually assaulted at a school and them not responding correctly or themselves having done it? And somebody who has no questions about that? Could we not find somebody who doesn't own a nonprofit that has been engaged in some questionable business practices involving public entities that we need to ask questions about? You couldn't find this is the best? Our kids have no hope in our current system if this is the best. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We'll be back here tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.